Awesome. All right. So as folks start to filter into this conversation with Kevin Carroll, the CEO and president of the Hotel Council, I just want to welcome you all for coming into this conversation. It's a little bit of a toughie, not gonna lie. This is a hard one, but an important one. And at Manny's, we're all about having those core conversations. So for those of you who don't know, Manny's is a physical place on the corner of 16th and Valencia in San Francisco, and we host civic programming for the community. Unfortunately, Manny's had to shut down due to the shelter-in-place order, but just because the place is closed does not mean the work is over. And so we've moved on to digital programming, and we're continuing to bring this programming to you live from people's living rooms. I'm in my kitchen surrounded by plants. And today we have the honor to talk to Kevin Carroll, who runs the Hotel Council, which is the association all the different hotels in San Francisco. So Kevin, thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure. I'm in my kitchen as well.
And you told me that the color behind you is Georgian brick.
I think it's called Georgian brick. It's been years since I painted it.
I love it. It's like red, but also kind of like irony, and it's beautiful. Okay, so I have to admit, I don't stay in hotels. I have like a personal, not that I don't like staying in hotels, though. My ex-boyfriend booked a suite at the Fairmont for me one night when he wanted to get back together, and it totally worked, and I have a whole story about that.
Okay.
That's a story for another time.
Hotels, there's a lot of good stories about hotels.
Yes, but I don't really have the money to stay in hotels usually, but I know that San Francisco has fabulous hotels, and I know that there's a direct connection between the hotel industry and the convention and big event industry that's very closely linked. So I'm excited to talk about this, though some of my questions may seem kind of dumb, okay? So don't judge me too hard.
Never.
Okay. So first, some basic questions about the hotel industry in San Francisco. Roughly how many hotels are there, and roughly how many rooms are we talking in the city?
Sure, we have about 215 hotels, and they range from 25-room hotels up to 1,500-room hotels. And there are 34,000 hotel rooms in San Francisco.
I see. And so 34,000 hotel rooms, and what percentage of these hotels are owned by like large multinationals, and which ones are small mom and pop?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's a big mix, because even if a hotel is owned by a multinational, it may be run by a multinational. So let's say it's run by one brand, it may be owned locally.
Yeah.
So hotels are interesting. You might have an ownership group that owns it, and then a management group that runs it. And I think for us, what's interesting in San Francisco is many of our hotels would be considered small businesses. So if you have that range, it's a big range.
Okay, and it feels like the hotels really are only downtown. Is that true? Like, I mean, I know I've seen like a couple in the Castro and a couple in the Mission and like some here and there, and like I guess Japantown, but like are they like restricted from other parts of the city? Like what percentage of hotels are downtown?
Well, I would say the majority of our hotel rooms are located either south of Market, Union Square, Fisherman's Wharf, and that's because you mentioned the conventions, that's one part of it, but then also from our tourism point of view, from people coming in. But we do have hotels pretty much across the city. There are probably portions of the city that aren't zoned to have a hotel, but we have hotels in Pacific Heights, we have hotels on Lombard Street, we have hotels in the Castro. So they're around, but you're right, the majority of the rooms would be concentrated toward downtown.
Okay, so let's just get into where we are right now.
Sure.
I mean, are any of the rooms being used by travelers? I mean, like, what's the occupancy right now?
Yeah, that's a great question. So when we started probably back in beginning of March, I describe it as if a car was going 60 miles an hour and then went down to 5 miles an hour. Right. So we went from probably 85% occupancy that we would have normally had in March and April. And now if a hotel's open, it would probably be in the single digits. So you might have anywhere from 5 to 10%. That may be some people that are having to travel, either they're within an essential business. And now with first responders and others staying in hotels, that's also part of the population. But many of our hotels have temporarily closed as well.
So tell me about March, April, and May for convention season and hotel months. Like, is that prime time? Is that typically a slow time? Were there a lot of big conventions scheduled to happen? And then, of course, we'll go to the summer. But first, let's talk about the spring. What's the spring usually like for the hotel industry in San Francisco?
So what's interesting about San Francisco, we have three main types of guests in a hotel: convention, business travels, we call it travelers, we call them transient business travelers, and then tourists or visitors that are just traveling on their own.
And then, you know, the odd ex-boyfriend making a big romantic.
Exactly, trying to do a great impression. Yes, exactly.
That's the small slice, but very important slice.
There are hundreds of stories like that probably happening as well. So for us, I think for us in these months would normally be very strong months. When you look at an occupancy rate over 80%, 85%, and one thing San Francisco has always been really beneficial for is the fact that we have a nice mix of convention, business travelers, and tourists. Mm-hmm. So some cities may be really heavy on the convention or heavy on business. We have a nice mix. Mm-hmm. And what's happening now is none of those mixes are happening. So mm-hmm. you really went from conventions that were originally planned for March, April, May, even July, June and July are being canceled or postponed. Mm-hmm. Business, as you know, corporations are telling people they can't and shouldn't travel. Mm-hmm. And then obviously tourists are not traveling either. And so we're in a situation where none of those components is happening. And we can talk more about this, but really the first impact is on our employees, and we can talk more about our employees too.
I would love to talk about your employees. First, I just want to say for all those who are currently on the call, if you don't mind just raising your hand, there's a button that allows you to raise your hand. I'd love to see who's here and also just get a little audience participation from those who are here. So please go ahead and raise your hand so I can see you. There's a lot of people on the call, and I just want to say thank you, all of you, for joining. Also, if you have a question for Kevin, you can type it into the Q&A box at any time. I see some people who are doing that. Kevin, don't look at them yet. I'm gonna ask you them. I don't want to get you to get distracted. But if you have a question, go ahead.
I'm easily distracted.
Yes, I'm
easily distracted.
I'm gonna ask all of them, but you can type them in at any time. Okay. So first, before we get to the employees, I want to ask you about precedent. And how long have you run the Hotel Council?
8 years.
8 years. How long has the Hotel Council been around?
34 years.
Okay. Is there any precedent for something like this happening in the
town?
No.
There really isn't. And it's a great question. People have asked, there's nothing like this that has happened before. Even if you look at September 11th or SARS, there's nothing to this magnitude ever. And I think that's, as everybody in your personal lives and professional, we're dealing with something that really people weren't prepared, not necessarily prepared for, but it's just beyond what you would normally even expect could happen.
Right. So I know that, I've interviewed a lot of people already in these conversations, and it is surprising to me to know, and I've learned, and I think a lot of people have learned, just how big of the San Francisco economy has to do with travel and tourism and hotels. So to the extent that you know, how many people are employed by the hotel industry in the city?
So the hotel industry employs about 25,000 people just in hotels. But if you don't mind, that's in the hotels. The jobs that are impacted and created because of hotels, and we can talk more about that, is over 100,000 jobs in San Francisco. 100,000. And that's because when someone stays in a hotel, they spend money outside the hotel, and small businesses and taxis and restaurants, they're tuned in. You'll love this, but I go to local restaurants around where my office is, and people, they know they work in the hotel industry. They're like, when's this conference start? Or they'll tell me, I know that this conference starts tomorrow, so we know we're going to be busy. And that's something that the impact across the city is massive, not only for our employees, but also for the businesses surrounding us.
I'm struck by the just severe lack of knowledge about what the future looks like. And it could be the conversation I was having right before this, actually the conversations I've been having all day with my friends and colleagues has been just a lot of panic really about, is this going to be a year-long recovery or 2 years or 6 months or 3 months? Kind of, can you tell me about what the general state, emotional state of a lot of these hotel owners is, and kind of how they're responding to how little real knowledge there is about what the future looks like?
Sure. And I think one of the things for the hotel owners first and the management companies was the impact on their employees. So how do we go from not having almost any occupancy, and how does that work for our employees? So I think in any crisis or a disaster type setup, you have, what does it mean immediately? And I think that's what most of us, either our small businesses or companies, even my organization, we had to look immediately to say, okay, here's what we need to do in order to continue and to survive. And I think the hotels have gone through that, most of them, because of how quickly the occupancy dropped. And now it's looking at what does that mean and how do we prepare for the recovery?
Right.
Uh, the Hotel Council is going to be, I'll be representing us on the task force that the mayor has set up. And that's going to be co-chaired with Rodney Fong from the Chamber of Commerce. And that's something where we will recover. We know that. We know that we will come through this. But the question no one can answer is how soon. And I think, Manny, when you said that, a recovery, even if we were to say, in May, we can now open for business, but will people travel? Will conventions still come? There's a lot of questions about how you can implement almost any business related to when things start to open up again. And I think that's what's causing some of the uncertainty, is even if we are able to, what will it mean? And a lot of people are saying things that we were used to now, or things that were taken for granted, will now be something that has to really be studied. How can you bring in groups of people? How can you run a conference?
It's so interesting because, not that I'm an expert in economics, but previous recessions, the things that caused the recession are kind of amorphous, right? And so you can, get the oil grease out and like pull out all the stops to get people to come, right? But this is different. It's not like, it's, mortgage prices and a bank regulations led to something. It's like the government is saying, in order to protect us, these businesses cannot function, or this amount of people cannot gather. And it's hard because the thing that hotels need to, you can't kind of organize your way into having more people when the government is saying you can't have a lot of people. You know what I mean? So how do you get a convention when the government's saying no conventions? You can't market yourself out of this problem.
That's true. And I think it's, even if you get to the point where you say, in this month, we think we'd be able to have a convention come into town, and conventions, we'll continue to book, but what will it look like? And
right.
Can you have, how would you have social distancing when you have 20, 30,000 people attending an event? And that's the part where there's a lot of questions. But I do think, what is the term? My grandmother used to say, necessity is the mother of invention. It's like, you'll find ways to make things happen. Like 2 months ago, I wouldn't have thought I'd be doing all these interviews and Zoom meetings with my friends and families. And you learn how to do things. And I think that's what we're going to be in, is how do we bring back the economy and bring back our employees?
Mm-hmm. So the 25,000 employees, have most of them been laid off at this point?
I think a good portion of them have either been furloughed or laid off. And then if a hotel is staying open, then some of the employees will be there as well. And then depending on how the hotel is being used, if they're contracting with the city, there'll be some opportunities for some employees as well.
And have you heard from any of the hotels if they've been able to receive federal aid?
A lot of, I'm starting to hear, they're waiting to hear, because many of the smaller hotels are could have applied for the SBA loans.
PPP.
And I've heard that they are doing that. but I haven't heard specifically if they've received them. They're waiting the way most people are is part of it. But absolutely. And I think as we look at recovery for all size hotels, there will be, in order to bring back employees and be able to open, there's going to have to be some sort of relief at all levels of hotels. Small, medium, and even large hotels are going to have to have some sort of relief to help.
So let's talk about the city and hotels. I don't think, I've only been here 7 years, but I don't think there's been this much attention about how the hotels can be a part of the homelessness solution in the time that I've been here. And I'm sure it has been, a lot of that attention has been directed to you. So, a lot of people are talking about empty hotel rooms paired with homeless people in congregate settings. That's a solution right there. And there's been a lot of back and forth, and I've interviewed the mayor about this, and I've interviewed, Supervisors Haney and Ronan. I'm interviewing Trent Rohr on Monday. Can you tell me about, how the hotels have been approached about this, and what kind of the hotel council and the hotels, the kind of stance is or has been on housing unhoused people in vacant hotel rooms?
Sure, and I think one thing, the hotel industry, we've been partners with Project Homeless Connect for years. We have a nonprofit collaborative that's been around for 25 years that actually repurposes everything from hotels, whether it's from extra products and towels and sheets to TVs, and we work with nonprofits as well. Mm-hmm. In this case, we met with the mayor's office and with Trent and the Department of Public Health right after, in early mid-March, and we learned more about what they were looking for from the hotels. Mm-hmm. And so that's where they sat down and said, we're looking for rooms for people that are in SRO settings and settings where they can't self-quarantine, and then also individuals that are first responders. And what the hotels did, we brought in about 50 hotels at that point to hear about the request, and then they put out a request for quotes from the hotels. And now it's up to about 81 hotels have submitted quotes, and Trent can definitely verify that for you. And we work with his department daily on this. And so they were able to put in, they're submitting that they can work with the city. And I think what's happening now is that shifted as the city was looking at different places to house people that weren't housed. Now they're looking more at the hotels for that. And that's what's being worked out right now with the hotels. But I have to tell you, some of the first places where people who weren't housed went to were hotels. So hotels that had contracted with the city early on, and they're currently in a situation where they're staying in those hotels. And now through the negotiations, more and more of the emphasis has been placed on housing people that are not housed in hotels as well. I think, and Trent can verify this, it's changing daily, but I think over 2,000 hotel rooms have been secured already. And that's been in partnership with the hotels that they're contracting with. So I think that's one thing, Manny, when a hotel, this has been a moving situation, and when the hotels are contracting, they're working with the cities, with the city on that.
So has there been resistance from the hotel council to offer up rooms or lease from the city?
Not from the council or from the rooms, from the hotels. I think the questions that have come up have been how to do it most appropriately. And I think that's what the mayor's been talking about, and others, is when you bring a population in that may need other support, how do you do that in a way that can work for not only the individual, but also for the property that's having someone come in and being housed in a hotel. And I think that's where the city's been working closely with not only the hotel groups, but also city departments and city agencies to say, how do we have the services that can be available and should be available for someone who's being moved into a room, whether it's a hotel room or any other setting as well.
So last question on this, I talked to Supervisor Ronan last week, and you can tell I'm just kind of like, I'm talking to everyone, you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's great.
I'm like, I should write a book or something. I'm not going to write a book, but I'm like, when Manny interviewed the entire city around coronavirus, what did he learn? So Supervisor Ronan was like, the city should buy hotels that come up to market that don't that maybe are not going to, they don't have what it they're not going to be able to reopen and just turn that into permanent supportive housing. Do you think that's something that the hotels would be interested in if the recovery is slow, the hotels are already full with folks who don't have homes, and they're looking to get an exit?
Well, it's interesting. I think that's something that would have to be discussed with the individual property owner. So if you're suggesting, or she's suggesting, a hotel may not be able to reopen for whatever reason, and then the city could buy that hotel.
And that hotel is fully occupied by unhoused people.
People.
You know.
Yeah, I think that's something that would have to, I can't speak for a property owner for a hotel, but if a hotel, that would have to be something the hotel would enter into with the city if they were obviously looking to sell the property.
Right.
I think that obviously that could be a possibility at some point, but I also think most hotels were opened as tourist hotels, and they would probably be looking to continue as that as well. But I don't think anything's completely off the table because you just don't know what the negotiations might come into.
Okay, we have some people with questions, and we're going to get to Q&A in just a minute. I just have one or two more. Have you heard of any of your hotels? And I'm sure you think of them all like your children. You know what I mean? Like, and I get it. Like,
people ask me my favorite hotel. I'm like, really? You're going to ask me what?
I'm not going to ask. I was not. For the record, I was not going to ask you that. But
No.
I love small businesses, right? And so people ask me, what's your favorite Mexican restaurant on the mission? I'm like, I can't tell you. I love them all.
Yeah.
So I know you probably think of them all like your children. And so I'm sure this is a very hard time for you, Kevin. But have you heard of any hotels say they're not going to reopen? Have any of them said they were going to permanently close because of that?
I honestly have not heard that. I have not.
Good.
I think hotels are asking themselves, like every business and every small business as well, every small business hotel, how long can they exist in a situation where they're not bringing in income? But I have not heard of any hotel say they're not going to reopen.
Got it. My last question is this, we're starting to move the theme of our questions for these conversations from, how are you dealing with this now to how can San Franciscans in San Francisco be a part of your recovery? Because, San Francisco's, flag obviously has us as a phoenix. And we've talked a lot about how San Francisco has emerged from periods of difficulty before. And the one through line that I found is that the community kind of comes together and helps each other out. And so how can San Franciscans help the hotel industry once this is all said and done? I mean, how can I help the hotels in my community? What is one way that we can do that?
It's a great question. One thing to remember, 53% of our employees live in San Francisco. So we're an industry where our employees both live and work in the city. I think hotels have restaurants, many of them do. And I think as we start to come back, if someone is looking to help the hotel industry, they're helping their neighbors who work in the industry. That would be patronizing and actually getting involved with the restaurants and being able to get people into the hotels. I think if people have guests that are visiting, find ways to include the hotels as well. And I think also just any efforts that are being made to help increase marketing San Francisco to the world, that San Franciscans can help by supporting those, because that's what's going to help bring people back to our city.
Maybe the odd staycation in a hotel room.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
Take a weekend off, go to a hotel of your choice.
Exactly.
I don't know what that would be for me, but maybe that's what I'll do. I'll support a local hotel and go hang out in a hotel room for a weekend and order room service or something. I always like grilled cheese and tomato soup for a room service.
Oh, God, that's great.
Okay,
I grew up with that.
What?
I grew up with grilled cheese, tomato soup.
Me too.
Every Friday.
David Perry, our mutual friend, how is the morale of the hotel employees? I've seen numerous examples of hotel workers giving back during this crisis, as they always do, and also the wonderful Purple Lights campaign. Can you talk about that?
Absolutely. Thank you, David. It's been incredible. I think one thing I found, I didn't grow up in the hotel industry. I've been in the industry for 8 years, is how resilient the people are and how they can quickly move to solve most issues. So people who work in a hotel, if something isn't working right, they're able to change it and do something else. And I think one thing that's now the Purple Lights campaign that David mentioned, every Monday, the hospitality industry and our workers are being recognized through the Purple Lights. And hotels, you've probably seen them, have done it, as well as they've arranged the lights in their windows to hearts. And that's something that's grown, and it's happening all over the world as a
Wow,
way of saying we care and we give back. Our
that's
employees
amazing.
have been working and volunteering. I mentioned our long-term partnership with Project Homeless Connect. Many of our employees have continued and continue volunteering, and each hotel has different partnerships with all different types of organizations.
Hmm.
So I'm continually amazed and actually just in awe of our employees in the industry.
Okay, we have a question. How many hotels have closed? We've answered that already. It looks like none so far.
Oh, close. They're probably asking temporary
Oh,
closures.
oh, oh, right.
So I would estimate now, and it does change every day. I'm estimating now maybe about 70 hotels have temporarily closed.
Out
Uh,
of 250.
no hotels that I know of have permanently closed.
Got it. What will it take for them to reopen? And what does recovery look like? Yeah.
Yeah, recovery. So I think once the declaration of emergency is either lifted, the shelter in place is lifted, and what it will take is that first, then actually getting the hotels back up to speed, but then also attracting people to come back. And
Mhm.
that's where these campaigns that Visit California will be doing, San Francisco Travel will be doing, all of those campaigns that will help encourage people to come back to our city. That's what it's going to take. And then obviously getting more and more people. More people in hotel rooms are more people working, and more help for small businesses around hotels.
Got it.
Yeah.
Joseph Copley, as an arts worker, the Hotel Tax Fund is a lifeline to my organization. We can expect a devastating hit to the GFTA fund. What do you think potential partnerships between hotels and cultural sectors could look like, as we are tied to each other in such a meaningful way?
It's a really great question, and what he's mentioning is the hotel tax. So when a guest stays in a hotel, they pay what's called a transit occupancy tax, TOT, and a portion of that goes to the Grants for the Arts program here in San Francisco, and that's something that's legislated and it's in there. But if the base goes down, so if we go from 85% occupancy with that tax down to almost nothing, that's what's going to be impacted as well. I think many of the hotels already have partnerships with arts organizations. I think we can help as a council to help connect there, and we work closely with the Grants for the Arts groups and Matthew Godot. It's how do we help get more information out to share on that? And then also, as we start to get business back, those funds will start to come back as well. But I think it's going to take, we're going to have to get creative. And I realize how devastating that is for the Grants for the Arts programs, because it's tied so closely into it. We were in the process of doing our Hotel Hero event this year, which is where we recognize our employees. And
Mhm.
the whole theme was tied into the Grants for the Arts program. So that'll
Amazing.
be postponed, and we'll bring it. We'll make sure it happens, and maybe we take that and do even more with it to make sure people recognize the impact.
Awesome, Joseph. Thank you for that question. Guru, I think, is a hotel employee, so I'm going to honor them with two questions.
Okay.
Is there a chance that hotels that are currently closed will not reopen until they've reached a threshold of guest occupancy? That's the first question.
Okay. I
Um, why don't you
go
go ahead and
ahead.
answer that one first?
Yeah, I don't. I honestly don't know. I think it's going to be dependent on how much expectation of people coming into the city will be. But I have not heard any numbers about if it reaches 20%, it'll be this. It does change with the number. So if we have 50% occupancy, some people will be back, and if we have 80% more, will be. But unfortunately, I don't have a good answer on them, a percentage for you.
Got it. Next question from Guru. Can you break down how different types of employees are being impacted and what their chances are for future employment as we transition back, i.e. contracted services like janitorial, housekeeping, servers versus full-time employees such as front desk, concierge, etc.?
That's a great question. I think it's going to depend on the type of hotel first, And then how big, so if you have a hotel that has giant banquets, let's say large banquets that are in there,
Right.
that's something where they have quite a few employees that'll be impacted.
Right.
I think if you have hotels will, you have to have the front desk is there. You're going to have housekeeping when you're open. I think, Guru, the thing I would say is it's going to have to flex up with how many people are actually coming back. And I don't think there's one, again, I wish I had a better answer. There's not one formula for who would come back first or who wouldn't. I think it's going to depend on the types of business and if conferences are coming back, or we have what's called an in-house conference or self-contained. So one hotel may be able to bring in a conference. If that happens, that'll affect more people as well.
All right, let's give Robert the last question. Are there any boutique hotels that can be repurposed as extended stay housing for healthcare workers or displaced college students?
Well, already hotels are contracting with the city for healthcare workers and first responders. If you're asking if they can be repurposed long term, that kind of comes back to the question that if a hotel was thinking of not staying as a hotel and doing changing how they would do it, I would say that would be something different that could happen. But I don't know beyond that how that could be repurposed for it. But I will say quite a few of them already are in the process of housing first responders and healthcare professionals.
Guru says, thank you, Kevin and Manny. I appreciate this forum. Guru, we appreciate you. Thank you for being on the forum.
Thank you,
Kevin, before we leave, I just want to point everyone to this quote above my head. Also, if you go to the chat box, there's a link in the chat box. It's joinit.org/o/Manny's. My business is closed. We are not making money. And so we are asking everyone that's tuning into these conversations to help me reopen and our business make it through this long and slow recovery by going to joinit.org/o/Manny's or go to your chat box. The link is there too. It's $36 a month to become a sponsor. We really do need the help from people. We have a goal of getting 36 more sponsors this week. If we get to that goal, that would be really helpful. So we're asking everyone on this call to become a sponsor. Go to joinit.org/o/Manny's and support my small business. Kevin, thank you for your hard work. Thank you very much. You get the last word.
Just thank you so much. We look forward to welcoming everybody back to our hotels, our employees, our visitors. We want it as bad as everyone else does to see this recovery happen.
Thank you so much, Kevin. And thanks to our team, Sam, Ram, and Jupiter, for operating this call. Have a good rest of your day.
You too.
Bye,
take
Kevin.
care.